Hello, my name is Cavarius, and in just a little while, I'm going to tell you a story about a young man who will never trust what he sees again. However, before we begin, let's make ourselves comfortable and take a few brief moments to focus on ourselves. When you're ready, set an intention to focus on your breathing as you take in a deep breath, slowly, holding it for a few moments before releasing. These are your breaths and are here for your comfort. As you continue to breathe, let your body tell you how slowly you can breathe in, how long you can hold it, and how long it takes you to exhale. When your next breath does happen, picture a small light that lives in the center of your body, expanding and getting brighter. As you hold that breath, hold that light and its energy, feeling its warmth. And as you exhale, use that light energy to blow out any dark clouds that may be getting in the way of its shine. Do this one more time, letting that light grow even brighter, even warmer, using its energy to banish the darkness as you exhale. I want you to hold on to this light, your light. You may find you might need it as we dive into the darkness of this tale. And now, wedding day. The ship loomed against the darkening sky, its rusted hull painted over with gleaming white. This once grand ocean liner was now transformed into an elegant wedding venue. Strings of golden lights hung along the railings, swaying slightly as the ship creaked. However, despite the decorations, the sound of waves lapping against the hull served as a steady reminder that this vessel was built for the sea, and its true purpose was never far beneath the surface. I stood outside the ship for a moment, taking in its massive frame. It was easy to imagine the generations of people who had once moved through its corridors, the cargo it had carried, the distant places it had been. Before arriving, I had looked up the ship's history, but most of what I found was vague, grainy YouTube videos and scattered web pages speculating about its sudden abandonment and eventual arrival in this quiet seaside town. That was the story, anyway, and it seemed like everyone, including the venue, was sticking to it. Nothing concrete, just fragmented rumors and half-baked theories of ghosts and monsters. I climbed the port side stairs, each step bringing me closer to the ship's entrance. The air seemed to change as soon as I stepped onto the deck. The atmosphere felt different, heavier somehow. I had never been one to believe in ghosts or the paranormal or anything like that. On the other hand, I do believe that history sometimes lingers, as if time left an impression. My cousin Lydia, the bride, was the complete opposite and had always been more superstitious. She loved ghost stories, urban legends, and the thrill of the unknown. So it wasn't surprising that she'd chosen a venue with a supposed history. To me, the only spirits that mattered were going to be coming from the open bar. I came from a big family, and over the last 5 years, it felt like every cousin had taken a turn at the altar. At nearly every reception, Jonah, the bride's brother, and I were among the last to leave. It became a predictable routine, something that people laughed about, but we never cared. These weddings were some of the only times that we got to spend together. Living on opposite coasts, our interactions were limited to these brief but familiar nights, full of music, drinks, and the shared understanding that we were in no rush to say goodbye. Jonah and I had grown up in the same neighborhood, spending most of our childhood side by side. We rode bikes through winding streets, built forts out of scrap wood, and explored the dense patches of trees that lined the outskirts of town. Jonah was always the one pulling pranks. They were never cruel, but I was usually the one caught in them. He would rig up a harmless trap in our fort or set up elaborate tricks during our adventures. Sometimes he pushed the limits, going a little too far, but it was never enough to truly upset me. No matter what, we always ended up laughing about it later. Through all the tricks and games, we stuck together, always finding ways to make the day last a little longer before heading home. I moved through the crowded room, exchanging greetings with relatives, all while scanning for Jonah. We hadn't spoken in months, not even a quick message, so I was looking forward to catching up. While in the middle of a conversation with my aunt, I spotted him across the room. He was wearing the same suit he always did at these events, standing still, facing me within a cluster of guests. I tried to wrap up the conversation, eager to go over, but before I could, I lost sight of him. The group he had been standing with was now beginning to take their seats for the ceremony, and he was nowhere to be seen. The ceremony was simple but well executed. Some elements were familiar, while others felt unique to this setting. As the vows concluded, the air filled with the sound of clapping hands and celebratory cheers. The newlyweds disappeared to prepare for the reception. As they left, the background chatter of guests was quickly overtaken by the first notes of music drifting in from the reception area. Before long, clinking glasses, laughter, and music reverberated through the ship's structure. I had just stepped away from the dance floor, my head buzzing pleasantly from champagne. As I stood leaning against the doorway leading to a dimly lit corridor, a faint movement caught my attention. A shift in the air, subtle, but was there. It passed close enough behind me to notice. I thought it was just another guest until I heard an unmistakable voice say, "I found something. Come check this out." It was Jonah's voice. Excited, I turned sharply, eyes scanning the hallway. At the very far end, I caught a glimpse of him just as he disappeared around the corner. I called out, urging him to come back. I was in no mood for games or his regular tricks. I was already feeling the effects from the drinks and had no interest. I just wanted to sit, talk, and enjoy the night like we always did. When there was no response, I pushed forward, slowly. The voice echoed again, calling out my name, but it always seemed to be just out of reach. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew this prank would be bad. The deeper I went, the more the ship's elegant renovations gave way to its past life. The walls were stained with age, marked with the remnants of water damage. The air was cooler, and for some reason the faint scent of salt and old wood lingered in the narrow corridors. My footsteps echoed as I moved forward, and as my heart began to beat faster, again the voice called out, "Come on, hurry up." Something just wasn't sitting right. I foolishly turned the corner again just to watch him vanish. It sounded like Jonah. It looked like Jonah. Same height, same suit. But something was off. His movements were too quick, almost like he was gliding rather than walking. "Jonah?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the stillness around me. No answer. Only the faint hum of the ship and the muffled bass of the party in the distance. I kept moving, faster now, drawn by some irrational pull. It was clear that guests of the ship weren't permitted this deep into the vessel. The dim light, the unfamiliar setting, and the alcohol were working together to make it difficult for me to keep balance. I stopped for a moment to steady myself, placing my hand on cold, unforgiving metal for stability. I looked up to see Jonah standing in a doorway. "It's right here. Stop being a baby." Pushing myself off the wall gave me the momentum I needed to follow Jonah into the dark room. I was thrown off balance again as my foot caught on something, sending me stumbling forward. My glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. Panic set in as I instinctively reached down to clean up the shards, only to cut myself in the process. My patience was wearing thin, and I shouted that I had enough, making it clear that I didn't want to play games. My heart sank as the sliver of light streaming from the hallway narrowed and a heavy door shut behind me with a loud thud. The darkness felt absolute at first, but I quickly realized there was a small round window on the door as I approached. I was getting seriously angry. My hands fumbled for a handle, but there was nothing. No knob, no latch, just cold metal beneath my fingertips. I looked through the window to see Jonah walking away in the other direction. Calling out his name did nothing to change his behavior. My breath became faster as I pounded on the window, smearing more and more blood over the small area. I could only faintly see Jonah as he disappeared into a void, leaving me trapped. I continued to pound against the door, screaming for help. In a moment of dejected acceptance, I stopped panicking long enough to rationalize the situation. Convincing myself that Jonah or someone else would eventually find me brought me a sense of comfort and practicality to the situation. I gathered my thoughts and began looking for a light switch. The room was quite dark, so I moved my hand slowly along the wall, hoping to feel anything like a light switch. Unable to find anything, my feelings of anger and betrayal began to grow, and I began to get frustrated again. I couldn't understand why Jonah had done this or why he hadn't come back yet. My racing thoughts halted immediately as I heard something move in the silent dark behind me. A whisper of fabric brushed against the still air. A scraping sound followed, something solid dragging across the floor, deliberate and slow. The sound shifted again, closer this time. Shapes stirred at the edges of my vision, A low creak echoed from the far side of the room, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if it was the ship settling or something else adjusting its position in the darkness. My pulse quickened. All I knew is that I was not alone. Without any sense of what lurked in the darkness, without a weapon, without even the ability to properly brace myself, I realized my only option was to continue yelling. My voice erupted from my throat. I shouted for help, hoping the noise would reach beyond the metal walls, hoping someone would hear me. But more than that, I wanted to drown out those creeping sounds, those slow, deliberate movements edging closer in the pitch black. My voice rang back at me, reflected by the walls of the confined space. My only hope was that whatever was lurking in the dark would hesitate, retreat, or at the very least, reveal itself. And then, light. The door wrenched open. "Hey, are you okay?" A concerned crew member had opened the door. I stumbled forward, gasping. Behind me, the room was still, empty, as if nothing had ever been there at all. I ignored the question and gently pushed past the server who had already begun to radio someone about her discovery. I collected myself as I made my way back through the turning corridors, now less complex than they had seemed earlier. I felt anger rise in my chest, not just for being locked in that room, but for the humiliation of being found like that. My thoughts raced back to all the times Jonah had pulled similar pranks when we were younger. He always found some way to put me in the middle of his jokes, leaving me flustered while he laughed it off. It had been one thing as kids, but now, to do something like this at a wedding, to leave me trapped and confused in that eerie space, that felt like more than just an old habit resurfacing. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I clenched my fists, jaw tightening. The music and the laughter became clearer as I neared the reception room. I stepped into the brightly lit space, my appearance drawing immediate attention. My aunt, Jonah's mother, stood near the entrance, chatting with a guest. She turned toward me, her smile faltering as she took in my disheveled state. My clothes were stained, my hand smeared with blood, and my breath came in sharp bursts. Without hesitation, I closed the distance between us, my anger barely restrained. My voice cut through the cheerful hum of conversation as I demanded to know where Jonah was, my tone sharp enough to make nearby guests fall silent. My aunt's face twisted with confusion as she hesitated, her voice uneven as she spoke. She explained that Jonah hadn't been able to make it to the wedding at all. The words felt disjointed and distant, as if my mind refused to fully register them. I had seen him. I had followed him. I had heard his voice calling me deeper into the ship. I had heard something calling me deeper into this ship. Thank you for joining me. Be well.